I am Edmund Wyndham, 70 years old, and until very recently, I honestly believed my incredible life's work was finally complete. As the proud founder of a massive multinational logistics empire based right here in Dallas, I had spent the last 40 years relentlessly sacrificing absolutely everything to ensure my family's untouchable legacy. But last Tuesday, standing quietly in the dark, suffocating shadows of my own master bedroom closet, my entire world violently shattered. I silently watched my son Gavin and his wife calmly calculating the exact agonizing timeline of my impending death. They were eagerly discussing the $25 million corporate insurance payout they would receive the very moment my heart finally stopped beating. That churning, merciless nausea detonated inside me the instant the packed Red Line train wrenched itself forward and pulled away from Cedars Station. It bore no resemblance to ordinary queasiness. What tore through me was savage and immobilizing, the sensation of broken glass, being dragged piece by jagged piece through everything soft inside me. A fierce, scorching pain ignited at the center of my chest, then crawled the full length of my left arm until it roosted, throbbing in my fingertips. The train's wheels shrieked against the rails, and every screech drove itself like a spike through my skull, feeding a vertigo so violent I was certain I'd lose consciousness entirely. I clamped my eyes shut and white-knuckled the cold metal handrail, holding on as though it were the only solid thing left in my world. 3 months. Every morning for 3 unrelenting months had opened exactly this way. I had formally surrendered the chief executive role at Wyndham Logistics, turning the full weight of the operation over to my son Gavin, and stepping back with what I'd told myself was pride. I had convinced myself the decades of pressure, the relentless grind of running global supply chains, had finally broken something loose in my aging body. So I went looking for answers. The finest medical minds in all of Dallas. I sat through battery after battery of diagnostic blood panels, grueling cardiac stress tests, and state-of-the-art neurological imaging. Not one of them found a thing. Every well-compensated doctor delivered the same verdict with a sympathetic hand on my shoulder. Severe anxiety, they said, the body simply wearing down as it must. Go home. Get rest. I pried my eyes open and fought to slow my breathing, drawing shallow, unsteady pulls of air. The car around me hummed with the indifferent routine of commuters scrolling endlessly through their phones or gazing at nothing beyond the grimy, streaked glass. Sitting directly opposite me across the narrow aisle was an old man. He had on a thick, heavily worn canvas jacket and a faded newsboy cap, and the face beneath that cap was a topographic map of deep-carved lines, the face of an Eastern European immigrant shaped by hardship most people never come close to imagining. He wasn't staring at a screen. His dark, razor-sharp eyes hadn't moved from my left wrist. A jolt of self-consciousness made me draw my arm in toward my chest. On that wrist sat an enormous, almost oppressively heavy luxury timepiece, a rare limited edition Swiss chronograph that Gavin had presented to me as a Father's Day gift not long after his big promotion. He'd made it clear I was to wear it every day, a walking emblem of everything the Wyndham name stood for. The thing was worth more than most high-end sports cars, without question. Without a word of warning, the old man lurched forward, throwing personal space aside entirely. He didn't ask. His arm moved with a speed that had no business belonging to someone his age, and his hand locked around my left wrist in an iron grip. His calloused fingers pressed into my skin hard enough to hurt. The shock of it sliced clean through the nausea, and adrenaline flooded through me. "Take it off now," he ordered. The words came out as a low, grinding rasp. Russian accent unmistakable and heavy, every syllable clipped with urgency. This was no request. This was a man issuing an alarm. "I see what is inside the casing. Welcome to Dadrevenge, a place where real stories of family loyalty and justice find their voice. If stories like this one speak to something in your own life, I would love for you to stay close and follow along for more. Before we go any further, Have you ever had a moment where the person you loved most turned out to be the one you should have trusted least? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear from you. A note before we begin: some elements of this story have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to specific real individuals is entirely coincidental. What matters most is the truth at the heart of it. What do you think you're doing? I snapped, wrenching my arm back with a violent surge of outrage. Keep your hands off me. That is an irreplaceable gift from my only son. You have no right to touch it. The old man held his ground. No apology, no retreat. He pushed himself closer instead, those dark eyes blazing with a grim, bone-chilling intensity. His voice fell to a low, cutting whisper that sliced right through the clatter and rumble of the moving train. I am a master horologist, he said, drawing out each syllable with slow, deliberate weight. 50 years I spent building and repairing the most intricate mechanical timepieces on Earth. I know the exact feel, the weight, the balance of a genuine Swiss movement. That thing on your wrist is a hollowed-out shell. There is no working machinery inside. He reached into the deep pocket of his worn jacket and produced a small, specialized metal tool. He raised it between us, the sharp silver tip catching the harsh fluorescent glare of the subway car. Open it here in front of me, he said quietly, his face like carved stone. Open it now, or I promise you will not be alive to see the end of this month. The conviction burning in those eyes rooted me to the spot. The scorching pain in my chest suddenly felt far less like illness and far more like something deliberate. I resisted for only a heartbeat, my mind recoiling from what his words implied. This was Gavin's gift, a token of his respect. But the relentless, grinding sickness had crept into my life at almost precisely the moment I'd begun wearing that band pressed tight against my skin. My hands shook as I fumbled with the thick leather clasp and passed the watch to the stranger. He handled it without an ounce of reverence. He didn't spare a glance for the diamond-encrusted bezel. He simply flipped it over, pressed the tip of his tool into the hairline seam along the back plate, and applied steady pressure. There was a clean, sharp, metallic pop, and the back casing dropped into his palm. He turned the open watch toward me so I could see directly inside. The air left my lungs. My heart slammed against my ribs like something trying to break free. There were no gears, no miniature springs, no delicate interlocking mechanical parts. The hollow interior of that extraordinarily expensive watch contained nothing but a strange, dense, absorbent metallic pad wedged firmly against the metal backing. It was weeping a slow, steady bead of thick, foul-smelling grayish gel. The chemical compound had been engineered to sit flush against my skin, seeping through, minute by minute, directly into my bloodstream. A loving gift from my son, delivering poison with every hour I wore it. I was off that train the instant the doors parted at the downtown station. The bitter Dallas wind hit me across the face as I climbed the concrete steps to street level, but I felt none of it. The nausea that had been grinding me down all morning was gone, burned away completely by a white-hot flood of adrenaline. I didn't go to a hospital. That wasn't what I needed. What I needed was the truth, and I knew exactly where it lived. I moved down the crowded sidewalk with the gutted watch casing clutched inside my coat pocket, the acrid smell of that gray gel still clinging to my fingers, sharp in my nostrils with every breath. 10 minutes later, I was standing in the soaring glass atrium of Wyndham Logistics, the empire I had built from nothing, the company that had consumed my youth. My health, my prime years, rose above me in steel and glass. The security staff nodded with practiced deference. I didn't acknowledge them. I crossed to the private executive elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. My pulse pounded against my eardrums as the elevator climbed. I was a father about to walk through a door I had never in my darkest moments imagined approaching. The doors opened with a soft chime. I strode past the reception desk, brushing past Gavin's startled assistant before she could finish saying my name, and shoved both heavy office doors open without knocking. Gavin was behind my old custom mahogany desk eyes on a financial report. He was dressed in a crisp, charcoal suit, looking every inch the polished, commanding executive I had spent a lifetime shaping him to become. His brow lifted in mild surprise as I crossed the carpet toward him. Before he could draw breath to speak, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the dismantled watch, and drove it down onto the surface of his desk. The metal casing rang out against the polished wood, the chemical-soaked pad laid bare for him to see. I planted both palms on the desk and leaned into him. I demanded to know what it was. I demanded to know why the movement of a Swiss luxury piece had been gutted and packed with a leaking, foul-smelling compound. I told him he had exactly 10 seconds to start telling me the truth before I picked up the phone and called the police. I expected him to crumble, stammering avoidance some visible crack in that composed exterior. Instead, Gavin sat utterly still. No flinch, no break in eye contact. He looked down at the ruined watch, exhaled a long, measured breath, and settled back into his leather chair. That stillness was worse than any confession. He didn't look like a man caught in something criminal. He looked like a senior executive mildly inconvenienced by a subordinate's outburst. Without a word to me, he reached forward and pressed the intercom button on his desk. He told his assistant to locate his wife and send her in. He released the button and turned back to me, his expression shifting into something that resembled deep, condescending concern. He told me to sit down, said I was working myself into a dangerous state and was going to trigger a cardiac episode if I didn't slow my breathing. I stayed on my feet, my hands shaking from equal parts fury and physical depletion, waiting for whatever fabrication he was about to produce. The office door swung open within moments, and Lydia came in quickly. She wore an ivory-tailored skirt suit and carried herself with the composed, deliberate manner of the seasoned pharmaceutical researcher she had once been. She took in my pallor, then the dismantled watch on the desk. Rather than alarm or guilt, her face arranged itself into an expression of warm, almost theatrical concern. She moved to my side, set a gentle hand on my shoulder, and began to speak. She was fluent in the language of clinical reassurance. The gray substance, she explained with careful precision, was not harmful in any way. It was a cutting-edge, conductive hydrogel bonded to a microscopic experimental biometric sensor, something her former pharmaceutical development team was currently trialing to track severe blood pressure fluctuations and cardiac events in real time. She held my gaze, her voice weighted with sincerity. My health had been deteriorating rapidly since retirement, she said, and the doctors had proven useless. She and Gavin had been genuinely frightened I would suffer a fatal stroke alone in that big house. She kept going, her tone smooth and unbroken. They had concealed the biometric chip inside the watch because they knew how proud I was, how fiercely I would have rejected a medical monitoring device or admitted my body was failing. The hydrogel simply read my pulse through the skin and relayed the data to a private medical server for continuous observation. It was a flawless lie, precisely engineered to account for every symptom and surgically aimed at every weakness I had. Gavin rose from behind the desk and crossed the room to where I stood. He took both of my trembling hands in his, and his eyes filled slowly, convincingly, with what looked for all the world like genuine tears. He gripped my hands and spoke in a voice cracking with barely contained emotion. He told me he had already lost his mother 5 years ago, that the wound of her sudden death had never fully closed. He looked at me with the face of a man clinging to the last thing he loved, and said he simply could not survive losing me as well. He begged my forgiveness for the deception, swearing that everything they had done came from a place of profound love and a desperate terror of watching me slip away. Hearing my son reach for his dead mother's memory dismantled the wall of fury I had constructed on that train ride over brick by brick. The emotion in his voice was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. A thick, smothering wave of guilt rolled through me, pushing down the lingering nausea still coiled in my gut. I looked between my son and my daughter-in-law and felt a sudden scalding shame for having suspected my own blood of something so monstrous. How could I have thought them capable of it? They weren't trying to destroy me. They were frightened children doing whatever they could to protect a father they feared was fading. The lie was brilliantly weaponized. The warm armor of family devotion snuffed out my fury before I could sustain it. I let it go. That evening, I placed the heavy timepiece in the top drawer of my nightstand and pushed it out of sight. I told Gavin and Lydia the experimental hydrogel was raising a burning rash on my skin, and I needed a short break from the device. They agreed reluctantly, though the smile that crossed Lydia's face was rigid as she advised me to put it back on the moment the irritation cleared. I spent the next 4 days resting inside my quiet, empty house, doing nothing but reading old business journals. What happened in those 4 days was nothing short of extraordinary. By the second morning, the crushing pressure that had lived in my chest began to ease. By the third day, the savage nausea that had greeted every dawn had vanished entirely. On the fourth morning, I opened my eyes and felt something I had almost forgotten: clarity. The thick, suffocating fog that had blanketed my mind for 3 long months had simply lifted. I felt like myself again. Like the relentless man who had constructed a global logistics empire from the ground up. My energy came back, my appetite returned, and the constant trembling in my hands finally went still. The realization that settled over me was terrifying. The doctors had written off my deterioration as the natural toll of aging, and they had been wrong. My sickness was bound directly to the watch. I needed to confirm it. I needed to know whether my gut was telling me the truth or whether I was nothing more than a paranoid old man grasping at shadows. On Friday night, with a trembling hand and a heavy heart, I retrieved the watch from the drawer. The faint chemical bite of the gray gel drifted up immediately, turning my stomach on contact. I fastened the cold leather strap around my wrist and made certain the spongy pad sat flush against my skin. I went to bed, dreading what morning would deliver. When I woke 12 hours later, the answer came swiftly and without mercy. The moment I tried to push myself upright, the room lurched and spun. A wave of brutal vertigo threw me back down onto the mattress. My chest clamped shut like something was squeezing my lungs from the outside, and a sharp, bitter taste flooded the back of my throat. The agony had returned with full and terrifying force, confirming everything I had feared. The biometric sensor story was a lie built from the ground up. I tore the watch from my wrist and flung it into the darkness across the room. I lay there fighting for air, my heart hammering against my ribs, confronting the truth that my own flesh and blood was responsible for what was being done to me. I resolved to say nothing. I would watch them. I would let them keep their smiles and stay close enough to see what was hidden behind them. The opportunity came the very next evening at our standing Sunday family dinner. Gavin and Lydia arrived at my house with a slow-cooked pot roast and an expensive bottle of imported red wine. I played my role with care, the frail, failing father, visibly crumbling under the weight of his own body. I dragged my feet, softened my words into a faint slur, kept my shoulders rounded and my bearing defeated. I wore a loose, long-sleeved shirt specifically to keep my bare wrist hidden from view. As we settled around the mahogany dining table, Lydia poured the wine, her voice laced with a honeyed concern as she inquired about my worsening condition. The moment arrived to drop the bait. Midway through the main course, I let out a sharp, sudden cry and clutched at my chest while my other arm swept hard across the table. My hand caught my crystal wine glass and sent it shattering to the floor. Dark red wine splattered everywhere, permanently staining the expensive Persian rug. I pitched forward in my chair, moaning, performing the collapse of a man overtaken by a severe dizzy spell. I held my eyes half shut and watched them through my lashes. A son who loved his father would have been on his feet in an instant. A daughter-in-law with any real feeling would have rushed to my side or seized her phone to call for help. They did neither. Instead of panic, what crossed Lydia's face was something else entirely. No gasp, no reaching hand. She turned and fixed Gavin with a cold, sharply impatient glare. She exhaled a clipped, contemptuous sigh, and then slowly rotated her wrist to check her own watch. It was the unmistakable expression of a woman bored by a delay she had already endured too long. Gavin stayed seated watching me with a flat, calculating blankness that held not one flicker of human warmth. The silence between them in that moment chilled me far deeper than any physical pain had managed. They eventually guided me to the living room sofa. The mask had slipped just enough to show me what was living beneath it. I lay awake through the night, my mind tearing through every handshake, every signed document, every decision I had made since handing Gavin the keys to Wyndham Logistics. By morning, the true shape of their plan walked through my front door. At exactly 9:00, the doorbell rang. I shuffled to the entrance, still wearing the performance of a broken old man. Gavin stood on the porch, but he had not come alone. Beside him was a lawyer named Clifford Prentice. I had never laid eyes on the man, but I recognized the briefcase and the practiced smile without needing an introduction. Gavin moved into my foyer without asking, steering the lawyer directly into my living room as though the house were already his. They laid a sprawling stack of legal documents across my coffee table. Gavin turned to me, his voice slipping into a tone of elaborate, condescending gentleness. "Dad, we need to have a serious conversation about your future," he said smoothly. "Your cognitive decline is getting noticeably worse every single day. What happened at dinner last night proved you are becoming a danger to yourself. You are losing your mind. Lydia and I need to legally step in to protect the family trust while you rest and recover." The lawyer Clifford Prentice clicked his pen and pressed a finger to the towering pile of documents. "This is a comprehensive financial and medical power of attorney," he said in a voice scrubbed clean of any emotion. "It transfers all executive decision-making, banking access, and medical directives directly to your son. Sign it now, Mr. Wyndham, and let Gavin carry the weight of the estate." The sheer aggression of it, the orchestrated surgical push to strip me of every asset and every legal right I still held, set off a deafening alarm in the deepest part of my mind. The net was closing. The heavy gold pen hung inches from my face as Clifford Prentice extended it toward me with the smooth, predatory smile of a man who charged by the hour. Beside him, Gavin leaned over the mahogany coffee table and tapped the signature line on the document stack. "Come on, Dad," he murmured, his tone soaked in a syrupy sweetness that made my skin crawl. "It's just a signature. 10 seconds, and then you can rest no more, worrying about the company, the accounts, the medical bills. I will take care of absolutely everything. I promise." I sat motionless on my own sofa, my pulse crashing against my ribs in a frantic, desperate rhythm. The audacity of what they had staged was almost beyond comprehension. They had positioned themselves physically between me and the hallway, boxing me in body and mind alike. The thick stack of papers sat dangerously close to a large, steaming mug of black coffee I had poured for myself just before they arrived. I stared down at those crisp, white pages while my mind tore through options at a furious pace. If I refused outright, if I threw them out and told them to leave me in peace, Gavin would use that refusal as his evidence. He would go straight to a judge, paint me as paranoid and combative, and push for a hostile conservatorship. I'd be in a facility before the week ended, and whatever chemical compound Lydia chose to administer next would replace the one in the watch. I needed a way out, and I needed it in the next few seconds. What came to me in a cold, sudden flash was this: the only path through the trap was to walk deeper into it. They had built their whole scheme around the story of a weakened, failing old man. I was going to give them the performance of a lifetime. I let out a thin, ragged sigh and let my shoulders cave forward. I made my breathing audible, shallow, labored, defeated. "You're right, Gavin," I murmured, keeping my gaze fixed on the floor. "I've just been so exhausted. I can't seem to hold a thought together. Show me where to sign." Gavin and the lawyer traded a quick, loaded look. The triumphant satisfaction my son could barely contain was revolting to witness. Clifford Prentice moved in, steering the heavy gold pen toward the dotted line. "Right here, Mr. Wyndham," Prentice said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Just press firmly." I extended my right hand, but I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, I gathered every fragment of focus I had and directed it into a single violent tremor. My fingers erupted into wild, uncontrollable shaking, spasming hard enough to look alarming. I let out a startled, confused cry and threw my trembling arm across the surface of the coffee table. My forearm struck the ceramic mug with full force. Scalding black coffee launched into the air in a dark, sweeping arc and came crashing down directly onto the center of the documents. It tore through the pristine pages in seconds, the black ink bleeding and dissolving as the liquid pooled and spread, reducing the power of attorney to a ruined coffee-soaked mess. I clutched my shaking hand to my chest and wailed theatrically, performing the panic of a man horrified by his own body's betrayal. What came next was the most revealing moment of my entire life. For one fraction of a heartbeat, the careful construction holding Gavin together collapsed entirely. He lurched backward to dodge the splashing coffee, and the expression that seized his face was something I will never forget: raw, unfiltered hatred. His eyes went narrow and cold, and his lip pulled back into a sneer of complete contempt. He was not looking at his father. He was looking at something that disgusted him, something he wanted gone. "Ah, for God's sake, you clumsy old fool!" The words came out of Gavin in a hiss, low and venomous, stripped of every pretense. The silence that followed hit like a wall. The air in the room seemed to go rigid. Then Gavin caught himself. He blinked, gave a small shake of his head, visibly forcing the mask back into position. In less than a second, the predator disappeared, and the devoted son stepped back into his place. "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry." He rushed out, snatching napkins from the side table. "I shouldn't have said that. Work has been brutal lately. Did the coffee burn you? Are you hurt?" I kept my face down, performing soft, bewildered whimpering, but behind it my mind was sharp and utterly composed. I had just seen what he truly was. I had seen the unguarded truth behind the performance. Clifford Prentice let out an irritated, thoroughly unprofessional sigh and lifted a dripping coffee-brown sheet from the pile, holding it at arm's length. "These are completely destroyed," he muttered to Gavin. "There is no way to submit anything in this condition to the county clerk. We'll need a clean set printed from scratch." Gavin worked visibly to keep his composure, the muscles in his jaw jumping beneath the surface. "That's fine, Clifford," he said quietly, though the effort behind the calm was plain. "We'll go back to the office and run a fresh set. We can come back tomorrow morning and finish this." He rested a hand on my shoulder, gentle, deliberate, entirely counterfeit. "I just rest today, Dad. We'll sort everything out tomorrow once your hands have settled down a bit. Don't give it another thought." I bent my head and buried my face in my palms, playing the part of a humiliated, hollowed-out man down to the last detail. I listened to the sound of their shoes moving across the hardwood. The heavy front door opened. It clicked shut. I counted out exactly 30 seconds of complete silence. Then I stood up. Every trace of manufactured weakness left my body the moment I was on my feet. My hands were steady. My spine was straight. I walked with intention to the front entrance, engaged the heavy brass deadbolt, and drove it home with a loud, solid clunk. I turned and faced my empty house. What had been a gut feeling had hardened into something absolute. I was being hunted inside my own home. The people I had given my life to protect were now conspiring to end it. I had no one left within my family. I was completely alone on an island they had built around me. But they had made one critical error: they had forgotten who they were dealing with. I was no longer a man waiting to be buried. This betrayal had reached down and reawakened something I had kept dormant for years, the cold, relentless business instincts that had built an empire from nothing. The war for everything I had built was now underway, and I intended to win it. I waited until the sound of Gavin's car had faded entirely before I moved from the door. The stillness of the house pressed in on all sides, but I had no time to sit inside the grief of what had happened. I needed hard, irrefutable proof of what that watch had been delivering into my blood. My first thought was to go directly to Pinnacle Medical Center in downtown Dallas, where I had been seen over the past 3 months. I stopped myself before I'd taken a step. Lydia had deep roots throughout the city's medical network. She had spent years inside pharmaceutical research, and her connections were extensive. If I walked into a major hospital with accusations of poisoning, there was every chance someone in that system would reach her before any results were in. She could bury the findings or have me dismissed as a dementia patient. I couldn't take that risk. I needed a facility that answered to no one she knew, one that operated on complete discretion and left no trail she could follow. I went to my closet and retrieved a small lockbox where I kept emergency cash. I filled my coat pocket with several thick bundles of $100 bills. I left my usual sedan untouched and took the keys to an old, unassuming cargo van I kept in the garage for hauling equipment. I backed out and took the back roads toward the outer suburbs of Dallas, avoiding the toll booths and traffic cameras. The drive ran just over an hour, the bleak winter landscape scrolling past the windows, while dark and urgent thoughts crowded my mind. I pulled at last into the parking lot of a stark, unmarked concrete building set back in a quiet industrial park. This was a private forensic toxicology laboratory, the kind of facility used by independent investigators and private defense attorneys who required chemical analysis that was airtight and completely off the record. It was precisely what I needed. I parked in the far corner of the lot and turned my collar up against the biting cold. Through the heavy glass doors was a reception area that was spare and clinical antiseptic and bleached floors, no soft chairs, no welcoming desk staff. A thick panel of bulletproof glass divided the entrance from the laboratory beyond. A tall, serious-looking technician in a white coat stepped up to the partition and studied me with quiet suspicion. I gave no name, no title. I simply slid the gutted watch casing across the stainless steel counter alongside a small, sterilized vial of my own blood that I had drawn carefully in my bathroom that morning. I need a full, expedited chemical analysis of the substance inside that casing, I said, keeping my voice level and low. And I need a full toxicology screen on the blood sample to determine whether that same substance is already in my system. The technician frowned at the strange metallic pad wedged inside the back of the luxury timepiece. He asked for identification and insurance information to begin the intake paperwork. I shook my head and pulled the thick bundles of $100 bills from my coat pocket. "I'm paying entirely in cash," I told him, pushing the money across the cold counter. "No digital records, no insurance claims, no names attached to any of this. I just need the truth about what's inside that casing." The technician looked at the cash, then up at my pale, sweat-dampened face. Something in my eyes seemed to communicate the full weight of what I was carrying, because he gave a silent nod, collected the money and the evidence, and carried the watch across to a stainless steel workbench, where he positioned it beneath a high-powered digital forensic microscope. I watched through the thick glass partition as he leaned in to study the foul-smelling gray gel that had been pressed against my skin for 3 agonizing months. He had barely spent a few seconds at the eyepiece before his posture went rigid. He pulled back sharply, eyes wide, with something that wasn't professional detachment. It was genuine alarm. Without a word, he turned and pulled a pair of thick blue hazardous material gloves from a nearby dispenser, snapping them on with practiced speed, then sealed the watch carefully inside a transparent, hermetically sealed biohazard containment bag. My heart slammed against my ribs as he returned to the glass partition. The composed technician from 2 minutes ago was gone. In his place stood a man carrying the weight of something serious. "I need 48 hours to run this through the mass spectrometer for an exact molecular breakdown," he said, his voice dropping to a quiet, grave register. But based on the crystalline structure and the corrosive reaction on the metal casing, I can tell you right now, this is not a medical device. Whatever this substance is, it is highly volatile and extremely dangerous. Do not let it touch your skin again. If you've been wearing this for an extended period, you are extraordinarily fortunate to still be standing here. A cold, suffocating dread poured through me from the top of my skull downward. I thanked him, pocketed the claim ticket, and walked out on legs that barely felt attached to my body. The winter air struck my face and I felt none of it. This was no longer a dark suspicion gnawing at the edges of my sanity. It was a terrifying, scientifically supported reality. I sat in the cold cab of the cargo van for a long time, both hands locked around the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. My own son and his wife had engineered a slow execution. They had refilled my wine glass and asked about my health while methodically poisoning me for the insurance money. Every instinct I had screamed at me to drive straight to a police station. But I couldn't, not yet. The mass spectrometer results weren't in. If I moved too early, Gavin would turn his considerable corporate resources against me, bury the evidence, and shred my credibility before I could land a single blow. I had to be the cold, calculated businessman I was before all of this. I had built an empire once. I knew how to play a long game. I started the engine and began the slow drive home. The plan was simple and brutal. Go back to that house, keep performing the role of the failing, oblivious father, and swallow every ounce of my rage while smiling at the people who were trying to kill me. I couldn't afford to give Gavin even the smallest reason to suspect I knew. I turned into my driveway as the last light was dying out of the sky. I dragged my feet up the front walk and slouched my way through the door, projecting exhaustion and defeat with every step. Then I heard Lydia's voice from the kitchen. I drew a long, slow breath, drove the fury back down beneath the surface where it couldn't show, and walked in. She was standing at the marble island, pouring herself a glass of filtered water with the ease of someone entirely at home. She turned, produced that artificial smile, and told me she'd used her spare key to drop off fresh groceries. She was just so deeply worried about my condition. I thanked her with a weak nod and muttered something about a crushing migraine shuffling past her toward the stairs. She lingered for a few unbearable minutes before finally going, the heavy front door closing behind her. The moment her car cleared the driveway, I moved fast. I went straight to my private study and locked the door behind me. The window of opportunity was narrow and shrinking. If Gavin and Lydia were actively running a timeline toward my death, I needed eyes and ears inside my own home to catch them proving it. I picked up my secure burner phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in more than 2 decades, Nadine Alcott. 20 years ago, Nadine was the finest corporate espionage and security contractor operating in the entire Midwest. When rival logistics firms tried to plant listening devices or steal supply chain intelligence, Nadine was the phantom I unleashed on them. She was brilliant, merciless, and she operated in complete darkness. Her voice on the line was exactly as I remembered, crisp, measured, giving nothing away. I skipped the pleasantries entirely. I told her my life was in immediate danger from members of my own family, and that I needed comprehensive, completely undetectable surveillance installed throughout my home without leaving a trace of evidence behind. I offered triple her standard rate on the condition that everything happened quietly and quickly. She accepted without a pause and told me to leave the side door of my garage unlocked at exactly 8:00 the next morning. I spent a wretched, sleepless night in the dark, listening for sounds in the house, half convinced that Gavin and Lydia would return while I was still exposed and unprotected. The following morning, the garage door opened with barely a whisper. Nadine materialized out of the early shadows in dark clothing, a heavy reinforced duffel bag over one shoulder. We exchanged a single, silent nod. She asked nothing about my pallor or my obvious distress. She simply got to work. I directed her to the main living room and my private study, the 2 rooms where Gavin and Lydia always chose to hold their hushed, impromptu family conversations. Nadine opened the bag to reveal a compact, sophisticated array of micro cameras, audio transmitters, and precision wiring tools. Her attention went immediately to the tall, cylindrical tower fans sitting innocently in the corners of both rooms. She dismantled the outer casings with practiced hands and embedded tiny high-definition lenses directly into the digital display panels, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. The cameras could record in crystal-clear detail, capture faint speech from across the room, and transmit everything in encrypted form to a secure remote server. She moved with the focused efficiency of a surgeon. No wasted motion, no hesitation. We were in the middle of modifying the living room unit when the front doorbell cut through the silence of the house. I went still. Nadine killed the power to her soldering tool and signaled for complete quiet. I crept to the front window and looked through the very edge of the heavy curtains. Lydia? She was standing on the porch, holding a large insulated thermal container, glancing at her own reflection in the door panel. She had come back without a single word of warning. If she stepped into the living room and found Nadine crouched among exposed wires and dismantled machinery, everything I was building would be gone in an instant. Gavin would know I was watching them, and they would accelerate whatever lethal plan they already had in motion. I looked back at Nadine. She was already silently packing delicate components disappearing into the duffel bag with urgent, noiseless precision. I had to get to that door and hold Lydia on the porch long enough for Nadine to vanish. I ruffled my own hair, pulled my shirt open at the collar, and forced several ragged, unsteady breaths until I looked genuinely unwell. Then I unlocked the deadbolt and eased the door open, using my body to fill the frame. Lydia's face lit up with that bright, performative warmth. "I brought you some healthy homemade soup, Dad," she said, her voice drenched in that honeyed, hollow affection. "I know you haven't been eating, and this has everything your body needs to start rebuilding your strength." I produced a raw, rattling cough and sagged into the doorframe as though standing upright was costing me everything I had. I reached out a trembling hand to take the container, but I kept my arm deliberately anchored across the entrance. She tried to push forward, eyes darting hungrily past my shoulder toward the dark, still hallway. "I really do need to come in and warm it up for you," she pressed, leaning into the heavy door with quiet but deliberate force. I groaned, clutching my chest with my free hand, filling the doorway completely. I told her I was burning with fever, that the exhaustion was crushing me, that I desperately needed darkness and silence and nothing else. Her frown deepened, frustration bleeding through her carefully arranged concern. I could see the cold, precise calculation working behind her eyes as she tried to gauge whether I was genuinely ill or concealing something. Back in the shadows of the house, I caught the faint, barely there scrape of the rear window being eased open. Nadine was slipping away. I coughed again, louder, more wretched, doubling over and pressing my damp forehead against the cool surface of the doorframe. "Please, Lydia," I wheezed, projecting every ounce of pitiful weakness I could manufacture. "Just leave the soup. I can't manage bright lights or conversation right now." She held me in a long, suffocating stare, her jaw clenching with tightly reined fury. Then she exhaled a grand, theatrical sigh, dressed up as sympathy. She shoved the container into my shaking hands. "You really do look terrible, Edmund," she said, her voice flat and cold, the warm title of Dad she usually deployed nowhere to be found. "Eat the soup. It's exactly what you need to rest." She pivoted on her heel and strode down the concrete driveway without a backward glance. I shut the door and threw the deadbolt, pressing my full weight against the solid wood, while cold sweat soaked through me completely. I stayed like that for several long minutes, absorbing the deep quiet of the house. The thermal container in my hands felt less like food and more like an unexploded device. I carried it to the kitchen and poured every drop of that thick liquid straight into the garbage disposal. I scrubbed the container with scalding water until nothing remained. As I dried my trembling hands, the secure burner phone in my pocket buzzed once softly. An encrypted message from Nadine. She was clear of the property, and the surveillance feeds were running. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. The opening move of my counterattack was locked in. but surveillance alone wasn't going to keep me alive. I needed to understand the real motive driving their lethal timeline. That meant following the money. I spent the rest of the evening carefully laying the groundwork. I killed the lights, leaving only the dim hallway lamp burning low. I dragged my footsteps deliberately on the wooden staircase, heavy, slow, convincing, in case Lydia had seated listening devices or told Gavin to make a pass by the house. I changed into pajamas, climbed into bed, and left a thin gap in the curtains, so anyone watching from outside would see exactly what I wanted them to see, a broken old man flat in bed, already gone. I lay there motionless for 2 grinding hours, staring up at the dark ceiling, listening to the wind work its way through the eaves. When the neighborhood had gone completely still, I eased out from under the blankets without a sound. I crawled across the carpet to the far corner of my closet, pried back a loose baseboard panel, and drew out a small hidden digital tablet. I'd bought the device months earlier when my symptoms first appeared, driven by some paranoid instinct I couldn't fully name at the time. It was my only window to the outside world now. I sat cross-legged on the floor and pulled a heavy blanket over my head to swallow the screen's glow. I powered the tablet on and connected through a hidden encrypted cellular network. I navigated to the login portal for Wyndham Logistics. When I handed the chief executive title to Gavin 18 months ago, I had surrendered every access key, every fob, every password. I wanted him to feel the full, unshared weight of leading what I'd spent 40 years constructing. But I was never a fool. Deep in the architecture of the corporate servers, I had quietly embedded a backdoor administrative code, a master skeleton key that cut straight through every firewall, every security layer, every 2-factor checkpoint in the system. Gavin never knew about it. Neither did the board. It was my ultimate failsafe, a ghost protocol, built to keep watch over the health of everything I'd made. I entered the complex string into the terminal and hit return. The screen went black for one terrible second before the familiar dashboard of the Wyndham Logistics Master Financial Database opened before me. The volume of data was staggering, but my instincts were still razored and sharp. I skipped past the sanitized executive summaries and polished profit reports Gavin fed to the board. Those were dressed-up fiction. I drove straight into the raw general ledgers where actual capital moved and breathed. The moment I opened the operational expense accounts, a massive financial black hole looked back at me. The numbers refused to align with any version of reality. Over 8 months, the company had hemorrhaged an astronomical sum. I tore through thousands of line items, tracking the digital paper trail with shaking fingers. Gavin had methodically authorized dozens of large, recurring phantom invoices payments, supposedly tied to international freight consulting software integration and overseas customs expediting. But every vendor name was completely unknown to me. I ran a background trace on the 3 largest recipients, shell companies. Every one of them registered to vacant post office boxes in offshore tax havens. Gavin wasn't simply mismanaging the company. He was actively looting it for millions. The sheer scale of the theft was breathtaking, yet it still didn't explain the terrifying urgency behind his push for my power of attorney that same morning. If he was already draining millions without anyone catching on, why did he need absolute legal dominion over my personal estate? The answer landed like a fist to the gut. The embezzled cash was only the visible tip of something far darker beneath. I pulled back from the operational ledgers and forced my way into the secured asset portfolio. I called up the registry for our distribution warehouses spread across the Midwest, the physical beating heart of Wyndham Logistics. I had spent decades buying that land and raising those buildings in cash, ensuring the company carried not $1 of commercial debt. When the asset data loaded onto the screen, the air left my lungs entirely. Every single warehouse had been secretly leveraged. Gavin had taken out massive high-interest illicit loans against the full equity of our entire real estate portfolio, using the company's physical foundation as collateral with shady private equity groups known for predatory, merciless tactics. I sat trembling in the suffocating dark of my closet, the screen's cold glow lighting the tears of pure rage running down my face. I worked through the crushing debt obligations against the dwindling cash reserves with rapid, brutal arithmetic. The math didn't leave room for hope. Gavin hadn't merely stolen from Wyndham Logistics. He had hollowed it out from the core. He'd dug a financial grave too deep for any recovery. The high-interest loan payments were compounding at a punishing rate, accelerating toward a point of no return. I stared at the projected default dates, feeling something inside me fracture into pieces too small to count. The logistics empire I had sacrificed my youth, my health, and my marriage to build was exactly 3 weeks from total bankruptcy. The whole monstrous picture snapped into focus at once. Gavin didn't merely want my personal wealth. He needed it desperately to bury what he'd done. The company was days from collapse, and when those predatory lenders moved to collect their collateral, the offshore embezzlement would be exposed and laid bare for every federal eye to see. He was looking at decades in federal prison. He needed my power of attorney to quietly liquidate my stock portfolios, drain my personal trust funds, and sell this house to plug the gaping holes in the corporate books before a single authority noticed anything at all. And he needed me dead fast enough that I could never comb through the wreckage or take the stand against him. The thallium in the watch, the counterfeit medical sensors, the furious drive for total legal control, every piece of it was one connected, frantic cover-up. I closed the tablet slowly, the screen fading to black. The sad, defeated old man had just died in that closet. I wiped the tears from my face and stood up in the dark. My son wanted to play a ruthless game of corporate survival. I was going to remind him precisely how an empire gets built. The digital clock on my bedside table pulsed faint green through the darkness, showing exactly 2 hours in the morning. I was still cross-legged on the closet floor, the heavy blanket pulled over my head, staring at the financial wreckage of my life's work on that glowing screen. My mind was running hard through legal strategies when the unmistakable sound of a key entering the front door deadbolt cut through the silence of the house. The brass lock cracked open with a heavy thud that drove a spike of pure ice straight through my spine. My heart slammed into my throat. Nobody else held a key to this house except Gavin and Lydia. They had walked themselves in during the dead of night, sliding into my home, while they believed I lay unconscious and helpless. Raw, primal panic clawed at the edges of my mind and threatened to swallow me whole. But the hard, ruthless instincts that had just been ripped back to life inside me seized control instantly. I cut the power to the tablet in a single heartbeat, dropping the closet into absolute blackness. I shoved the blanket away and scrambled across the carpet as silently as I could manage. I heard the front door ease shut, followed by the soft, deliberate click of the deadbolt being thrown from the inside. They were sealing us in together. I reached the side of my bed, jammed my trembling fingers under the heavy mattress, and forced the tablet deep beneath the box spring, driving it as far toward the center as my arm would go. Then I threw myself under the thick down comforter and hauled the blankets to my chin. I locked my body into the rigid, contracted posture of a man failing fast. I shut my eyes at the precise moment the wooden staircase began its slow, agonizing creak. Someone was ascending with great care, distributing their weight deliberately, step by measured step. Every footfall landed like a strike against my ribcage. The adrenaline flooding my veins was deafening, roaring through my ears like white water. I had to consciously drag my breathing back down, shaping it into the shallow, faintly labored cadence of a deeply comatose, heavily sedated patient. I let my jaw go slack, drained every muscle in my face, and surrendered completely to the physical theater of helplessness. The footsteps arrived at the second-floor landing. I caught the soft whisper of expensive fabric, and then unmistakably, the faint, familiar drift of Lydia's imported floral perfume seeping into the room. The brass handle of my bedroom door turned with an excruciating, drawn-out squeak. A thin ribbon of pale yellow hall light stretched across the dark carpet and widened as the door swung inward. My eyes stayed sealed, my lids loose and still, but every other sense I possessed was running at full pitch, Two separate sets of footsteps crossed the threshold. They moved with a predator's quiet grace, gliding forward until they were standing almost directly over the edge of my mattress. I could feel their presence bearing down on me, a dark, dense pressure radiating into the cold air. Is he actually asleep? Gavin breathed, his voice so low and so close I could feel the faint disturbance of it against the stillness of the room. He's completely out cold. Lydia answered, her tone clinical, stripped bare of anything resembling warmth or humanity. I doubled the dosage of the muscle relaxants in his evening tea before we left today. His central nervous system is suppressed so deeply he wouldn't wake up if we fired a gun in this room. Just focus on the documents. We have an incredibly narrow window before the bank opens tomorrow morning. I felt the mattress shift just slightly as Gavin leaned over me. The closeness was physically revolting. Every fiber I had screamed at me to open my eyes, to get my hands around his throat, to force him to account for the financial devastation he had engineered. My fists clenched hard beneath the blankets, fingernails cutting into my palms. I made myself release it, kept my hands completely limp, preserved the flawless illusion of a dying man. I let my breathing slow, further still, exhaling a soft, uneven snore to deepen the performance. The top drawer of my wooden nightstand slid open with a quiet metallic whisper right beside my head. They were searching inches away from me. The faint rustling of papers and the small shifting of objects rang out sharp and clear in the tense hush of the room. Gavin was hunting for my personal checkbooks, my banking tokens, and the small leather journal where I had been foolish enough to write my private passwords by hand. He was after the final keys to empty my personal estate, the last desperate patch to stop the hemorrhaging wound he had torn through the corporate ledgers. I can't find the master password journal anywhere, Gavin hissed in a tight, frantic whisper. It's supposed to be right here in the top drawer. I watched him put it here last week. Where did the old fool hide it? Keep looking, Lydia said smoothly, her command precise and unhurried. Check the bottom drawer. Look under the bedside lamp. We need those routing numbers to push the offshore wire transfers through tomorrow afternoon. If we don't liquidate his personal trust funds by end of day, those equity lenders will move on the warehouses and the entire corporate facade comes apart, Gavin. You need those account numbers right now. The sound of a drawer clicking shut punctuated his words like a period. Look at him, Lydia. He's just wasting away into nothing. It's the only logical solution, Gavin, Lydia replied, her voice descending into a register so calm it was chilling. The thallium absorption is progressing beautifully. Continuous transdermal exposure replicates accelerated neurodegenerative failure with perfect fidelity. The doctors at the hospital are already fully convinced it's rapid onset aggressive dementia combined with systemic organ shutdown. He won't last another week. By the time his heart finally stops, the autopsy will confirm nothing beyond natural age-related cardiac arrest. We just need to secure his assets legally before he draws his last breath. The absolute cold certainty of their timetable crashed over me like a wave of freezing water. He won't last another week. They had assigned me a hard expiration date. They were standing over my supposedly comatose body and discussing my murder with the same detached ease they might bring to reviewing a quarterly earnings report. The sheer unvarnished evil of my own blood was a crushing weight on my chest. I fixed my entire focus on the slow, steady rise and fall of my lungs, strangling the violent impulse to scream. I had to stay invisible. I had to remain a ghost in the dark. I lay still long after their footsteps retreated. I listened until the front door clicked shut and the sound of Gavin's engine dissolved into the night. Only then did I open my eyes. The cold sweat coating my skin felt like a burial shroud. I was alone again, but the silence no longer felt like shelter. It felt like a tomb they had already furnished for me. They had a timeline. I had fewer than 7 days before they expected my heart to stop. I climbed out of bed and spent the night moving through the dark room, running every possible scenario through my mind. Every legal maneuver, every counterattack I could mount before the toxin they'd strapped to my wrist finished its work. I needed undeniable scientific proof. I needed the final piece to fall into position. That piece arrived exactly 2 days later. I was in my locked study staring at old family photographs when the burner phone concealed in my desk drawer began to vibrate. The sudden buzz shattered the silence like a hammer. I grabbed the device and stared at the blocked number on the screen. It was the private forensic toxicology laboratory in the suburbs. I steadied my breath and brought the phone to my ear. The voice belonged to the same technician I had met 48 hours earlier. His tone had changed, taut, now stripped of the composed, professional distance he'd held during our first meeting. He asked me to confirm my identity using the numerical code he'd assigned to my cash transaction. I recited the numbers without hesitation. I heard him exhale long and heavy before he started to speak. He told me he had run the chemical sample through the mass spectrometer several times over because he could not accept his initial results. The gray, foul-smelling gel sealed inside the metallic casing of the luxury timepiece was not an experimental biometric sensor. It was not an inert conductive hydrogel built to passively track cardiovascular readings. It was a highly concentrated, lethally engineered transdermal delivery system. The technician paused for the briefest moment, his voice dropping to a low, grave murmur. The primary active compound suspended within the synthetic gel, he said, was a heavy metal known as thallium. The word settled into the cold air between us, dense, final, and without mercy. I had come across the name before, but only in the margins of old espionage novels or the footnotes of historical assassinations. Before I tell you what I found lurking in the dark that night, and what it revealed about the depth of the danger I was truly in, let me ask you this: if you discovered that someone close to you had been quietly working against you, would you confront them immediately, or would you stay silent and build your case first? The technician walked me through the horrifying reality of the substance with the measured precision of an autopsy report. Thallium, he told me, is what toxicologists have long called the poisoner's poison. It is a highly toxic heavy metal, completely tasteless, absolutely odorless, and nearly invisible to standard hospital blood panels, unless the attending physician knows precisely what to screen for. But the most terrifying element of what they had engineered was its delivery method. By suspending the metal in a permeable hydrogel and pressing it flush against the thin skin of my wrist, they had bypassed my digestive system entirely. The thallium was absorbing into my bloodstream every second I innocently wore the watch. Chronic low-dose thallium poisoning, he explained meticulously, replicates the natural decay of old age. It attacks the central nervous system, producing exactly the kind of peripheral neuropathy, violent tremors, and bone-deep exhaustion I had been living with. It ravages the gastrointestinal tract, generating the blinding nausea and vertigo that ambushed me every morning. And it methodically shuts the major organs down one by one, steering the body toward an inevitable, seemingly natural cardiac arrest. The diabolical precision of the scheme was breathtaking. No ordinary criminal mind could have constructed something this chemically sophisticated. It demanded highly specialized knowledge, unrestricted access to restricted laboratory compounds, and an intimate understanding of human physiology. It required a trained pharmaceutical researcher. It required Lydia. She had weaponized her medical background and professional connections to synthesize a flawless, untraceable murder instrument. She had calculated the exact dosage needed to bring a grown man to ruin without triggering any acute toxicity alarm. She had calibrated the gel to dismantle my body at a controlled, deliberate pace, giving Gavin just enough time to panic me into surrendering my estate before I died. The story they had fed to the doctors at the hospital was a masterwork of lethal misdirection. They had constructed a tragically convincing portrait of an aging executive crumbling under the weight of dementia and organ failure, concealing their toxic sabotage behind a seamless facade of family devotion. I ended the call with the forensic laboratory, my hand trembling so badly I nearly dropped the burner phone onto the floor. I walked to my desk and pulled open the deep bottom drawer. The gutted metallic shell of the luxury Swiss watch rested there in the shadows, looking like nothing more than a discarded piece of jewelry. I stared down at it, and a heavy, aching sorrow flooded through me. This was the expensive, beautifully wrapped gift my son had placed in my hands on Father's Day. He had smiled and held me and told me how much he loved me while fastening a precision-engineered execution device to my wrist. They were not simply trying to seize my personal fortune. They were not merely trying to push me out of the empire I had spent decades constructing. My own son and my supposedly devoted daughter-in-law were systematically, deliberately murdering me in plain view. Every day I wore that beautiful symbol of supposed family love, I was an active participant in my own killing. The grief scorching my chest was swallowed by a rising, consuming fury. They had badly underestimated the man standing in their way. They had confused my unconditional love for foolishness and my physical decline for mental collapse. They genuinely believed they were dealing with a confused, fading old man who would dissolve quietly into the dark and hand over the keys to everything he'd built. But they had miscalculated. They had handed me a fatal timeline while having no idea I had already uncovered their entire playbook. I knew exactly how they were draining millions from the logistics company, and I held undeniable scientific proof of their calculated murder attempt. I shut the heavy desk drawer and locked it. I no longer had the luxury of mourning the son I believed I had raised. I needed to ready myself for absolute unrelenting war. I would let them go on believing they were winning. I would let them walk back into this house fully expecting to arrange a funeral. The reality that was coming for them would be something else entirely. I waited until the house fell silent before I moved. My mind dropped into a cold, surgical clarity. I retrieved the digital tablet from beneath the floorboards. I needed to see what had unfolded downstairs while I lay there performing comatose. I settled onto the mattress, draped the comforter over my shoulders, and brought the secure application up. The encryption keys loaded without a hitch. The remote server connected within seconds. The dashboard showed 2 active video feeds. I selected the living room feed and rewound it to 2:30 in the morning. The infrared image sharpened into focus. The hidden camera gave a clean, unobstructed sightline across the room. I watched my son and daughter-in-law descend the staircase and step into frame. They moved directly to my mahogany liquor cabinet. Gavin pulled out a bottle of my rare, expensive single malt bourbon. I watched in cold revulsion as he filled 2 large glasses and passed one to Lydia before dropping onto my leather sofa. They sat there drinking my prize bourbon like triumphant vultures dividing a carcass. I pushed the tablet's volume to its maximum. The sensitive audio transmitters captured their voices with chilling fidelity. Gavin took a long, desperate pull from his glass and let his head fall back against the cushions. He looked hollowed out, his face drawn, his color gone. He raked a shaking hand through his hair and exhaled a wretched sigh. "We are running out of time, Lydia." He breathed, his voice fraying at every edge. "The bank is going to notice the empty accounts before the month is out. The commercial loans are already in default. Every dollar of operational cash reserve is gone. Every single one." Lydia lifted her glass and took a slow, composed sip. "You just need to hold your nerve, Gavin," she replied, her tone as smooth and cold as polished stone. "We have the power of attorney documents prepared. The moment his heart gives out, full control of the estate transfers to you. We liquidate the personal trust funds, sell this house, and quietly backfill the corporate accounts before the board notices a single dollar missing. It is a flawless plan." I can't stop panicking," Gavin snapped, lurching forward and clenching his glass so hard I half expected it to crack. "You don't understand the size of this, Lydia. It is exactly $15 million of critical operational capital simply gone." I stared at the screen, the breath seizing in my chest. 15 million. A staggering, incomprehensible sum of liquid cash to disappear out from the logistics company ledgers. I listened as Gavin began to come apart, his confession spilling into the room in broken fragments. He admitted he had secretly wired the $15 million to a string of unregulated underground cryptocurrency exchanges operating out of Eastern Europe. He had convinced himself he was a financial visionary, that he could multiply the company's assets in weeks and finally step out of my shadow. The digital markets collapsed. His leveraged positions were wiped overnight. Every dollar gone in an instant. But the horror didn't end there. Gavin kept talking, his voice dropping lower, saturated with raw terror. He confessed that in a blind panic to claw back the losses, he had turned to illegal offshore gambling syndicates. He had pledged the company's physical warehouses as collateral to secure massive high-interest loans from dangerous underground lenders. He had bet the borrowed money on illegal sports books, chasing a miracle that would never come. He lost every single wager. "These aren't just lenders, Lydia," Gavin whimpered, his voice cracking into something barely recognizable. "They're connected to the mob. They don't negotiate restructuring plans. They want their money. They called me twice yesterday. They said if the first large installment isn't in their hands by next Friday, they're sending people to my office. They will physically break my legs, Lydia. Then they will take the company. Then they will take our lives." He had bled the entire logistics empire dry. I sat watching the feed, a profound and chilling silence pressing down on my bedroom. The full reality of what my son had done settled over me like a stone. He was not a ruthless corporate architect engineering a hostile takeover. He was a weak, catastrophically foolish boy who had gambled with money he hadn't earned on games he had no business playing and lost on a spectacular and irreversible scale. He had thrown away 40 years of blood and sacrifice on imaginary digital coins and underground sports bets. And when the consequences of his staggering stupidity arrived to collect his solution, his first and only instinct was to slowly poison his own father to pay off mob debts. Lydia set her crystal glass down on the coffee table with quiet deliberateness. She reached out and gripped Gavin by both shoulders, turning him until he had no choice but to meet her eyes. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, her voice carrying not a trace of human warmth. "You're not going to lose your legs, and we are not going to lose our lifestyle. The old man is fading fast. The heavy metal toxicity compounds more severely with every passing day. His central nervous system is collapsing, and his heart muscle is critically weakened. He will be dead by Wednesday. Thursday at the absolute latest. Once he is in the ground, his millions belong to us. We pay off the syndicate, we clean up the corporate ledgers, and we walk away untouched. You just need to keep playing the grieving son for a few more days." Gavin stared at her, tears of wretched relief pooling in his eyes. He nodded weakly and pulled her into a desperate embrace. "Thank you," he whispered against her shoulder. "I don't know what I would do without you. I just need him to die. I just need him to die right now." I powered the tablet down slowly, the glowing screen collapsing into total blackness. I sat in the silent closet, the weight of the house pressing down around me. My own son was praying for my immediate death to rescue himself from the violent criminals he had brought crashing into our lives. My daughter-in-law was calmly calculating my precise expiration date. Whatever grief I had felt earlier was gone, burned away, and replaced by a cold, absolute resolve. They wanted my fortune to save their worthless lives. They wanted me to slip away in the night so they could inherit everything I had bled to build. But I was not a victim, and I was not dying on their schedule. I had forged an empire by dismantling anyone who moved against what was mine. I was going to take their carefully engineered murder plot and turn it into an inescapable trap. They needed my money by next Friday, or the mob would come for them. I was going to make certain that when Friday arrived, all they held were empty hands and the walls of a cage they had built themselves. This was no longer about surviving. It was about total, unsparing destruction. I sat motionless in the suffocating dark of my closet. The pale glow of the tablet screen spilled across my trembling hands. I believed I had already heard the worst of what they had planned. I thought the gambling debts and the looming corporate bankruptcy were the floor of this abyss. But the video feed was still rolling. The timestamp in the corner of the screen ticked silently forward, and the conversation in my living room kept unfolding. Lydia sank back into the plush leather cushions of my sofa, swirling the amber liquid in her crystal glass. She looked thoroughly annoyed, her fine features tightening into an expression of cold frustration. "He is taking far too long to die, Gavin," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet room with the precision of a scalpel. The initial calculations assumed a much faster absorption rate. His cardiovascular system is surprisingly resilient for a man his age. We cannot afford to wait for nature to finish the job while those lenders are pressing down on us. Tomorrow morning, before you go to the office, you need to swap out the hydrogel pad inside the watch casing. I have already prepared a new batch in my private lab. I significantly increased the thallium concentration. The dosage is massive. The moment it contacts his skin, his nervous system will begin to collapse rapidly. He will lose all motor function by tomorrow evening. Gavin nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the bottom of his empty glass. He did not look disturbed by his wife talking through the mechanics of chemical murder. He simply looked impatient. "We just need his signature on the power of attorney first," Gavin replied, his voice completely hollowed of any trace of a son's feeling. "I will push the lawyer to bypass the standard notary protocols if I have to. Once we have his signature and full legal executive control is secured, we put him straight into that private nursing home on the north side. They ask no questions, and their staff is notoriously negligent. We isolate him in a private room and let the heavy metal do the rest completely out of sight. No more draining family dinners. No more performing the role of devoted, concerned children. We lock the door and walk away for good." Lydia smiled, a thin, predatory curl at the corners of her mouth. "And then the real financial payout finally triggers," she said softly. "Exactly." Gavin exhaled, his eyes igniting with a feverish, desperate hunger. The moment his heart stops, the corporate contingencies activate automatically. The board of directors mandated a keyman life insurance policy on him 15 years ago, when the logistics empire was in rapid expansion. He is fully insured for exactly $25 million. As the sole remaining heir and acting chief executive, that money flows directly into a blind corporate trust I control entirely. $25 million of clean, untraceable liquid capital dropping straight into my hands. Gavin leaned toward Lydia, his voice trembling with manic urgency. "We take the insurance payout and immediately wire the full $15 million to the criminal syndicate. We clear the gambling debts completely. We take the remaining $10 million, quietly liquidate whatever warehouse assets remain before the federal auditors show up, and we disappear. A private charter to Europe by the end of the month. Monaco, the south of France, we start over entirely. We never look back. My father dying is our complete financial salvation." The sheer scale of the betrayal struck me like a freight train driving through my chest. I had to force myself to breathe. My lungs felt sealed shut, scorched by the suffocating understanding of exactly what I was worth to my only child. My life, my 40 years of unrelenting sacrifice, my unconditional love. It all reduced to a $25 million insurance payout. I was not a father to him. I was a corporate asset waiting to be cashed out. A breathing, walking lottery ticket he was methodically trying to redeem. I watched my son kiss his wife on my sofa, the two of them drunk on the prospect of my death, celebrating wealth that wasn't theirs yet. They were convinced they had accounted for everything. The perfect, untraceable poison, the clean financial motive, the international escape route already plotted. They assumed I was nothing more than a frail old man stumbling obliviously toward the grave they had dug. They believed my entire legacy was theirs to plunder at will. I reached out and tapped the screen, cutting the live video feed. The silence that followed was absolute. I sat in the pitch black, and something shifted inside me. A profound, terrifying calm descended over my exhausted mind like a dropping temperature. The consuming rage that had gripped me evaporated entirely, replaced by something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. I had built a massive empire by outmaneuvering the most ruthless operators in the entire logistics industry. I knew exactly how to take apart a hostile adversary piece by careful piece until they had nothing left to stand on. And Gavin had just handed me his entire playbook. He wanted the legal power of attorney. He wanted the corporate insurance payout. He wanted to flee to Europe and live like a king on the proceeds of my chemical execution. I was going to let him believe every piece of that plan was falling perfectly into place. I would give him the grand illusion of complete victory right up until the moment it was irreversible. I drew the tablet back into my lap and reopened the secured corporate network portal. I bypassed the operational ledgers and pushed directly into the buried human resources and insurance administrative files. I needed to verify the precise legal terms of the keyman policy Gavin was staking his life on. The document was buried deep in the corporate digital archives. I read through the dense contractual language with the practiced speed of a man who had spent 4 decades parsing fine print. The policy was entirely valid and would pay out exactly $25 million upon my certified death. But Gavin had fundamentally misread a critical piece of the underlying legal structure. The primary beneficiary was not my son. The sole legally binding beneficiary was the logistics company itself. And as the majority shareholder and original founding owner, I still held full unilateral authority to rewrite the entire corporate trust structure whenever I chose. I was going to lock him out of every single penny, protecting everything I had built while springing the trap around him. I was no longer the prey. The rest of that night passed in cold, precise calculation. When dawn edged through the gaps in my velvet curtains, the heartbreak that had once paralyzed me had gone completely quiet. In its place sat an unbreakable block of pure ice. I climbed out of the closet and returned the digital tablet to its hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. I smoothed the comforter back across the mattress, making sure the sickbed looked exactly as rumpled as a dying man would leave it. I walked into the master bathroom and drove freezing water into my face. Staring at my reflection, I did not see the frail victim my son had designed me to be. I saw the founder of Wyndham Logistics. I saw a man who had weathered hostile takeovers and ruthless supply chain wars. Gavin and Lydia had foolishly assumed my love for my son made me blind and weak. They were about to discover that the same ruthlessness I had used to construct my empire was now aimed squarely at their destruction. I waited until 9 in the morning, listening carefully, as Gavin and Lydia moved through their morning routine downstairs. I heard the front door pull shut and the fading hum of their vehicles rolling down the driveway. The moment the house was empty, I retrieved my secure burner phone and dialed a restricted federal number I had kept committed to memory. I had first called Special Agent Leonard Hargraves 15 years ago when an international smuggling ring attempted to push into my eastern seaboard shipping routes. Leonard was the lead investigator on that case. We had worked side by side to dismantle the entire criminal network. I had come to respect his sharp mind, his uncompromising moral compass, and his absolute discretion. When he answered, his voice was crisp and professional. I skipped the pleasantries entirely. I told him I had uncovered a massive corporate embezzlement scheme tied directly to offshore underground syndicates, and that it was inseparably linked to an active attempted murder. I told him the primary suspect was my own son. Leonard instructed me to meet him at a secure, unmarked federal facility on the industrial outskirts of the city. I dressed in layered clothing, slipped out the back door, and drove my oldest vehicle to the meeting point. Leonard was waiting inside a sterile, windowless briefing room. He looked older, his hair laced with gray, but his eyes carried the same piercing focus I remembered. I settled into the chair across the metal table and began laying out what I had brought. I walked him through the nightmare that had consumed my life over the preceding 48 hours, piece by methodical piece. First, I placed the encrypted flash drive on the table, the one carrying the raw Wyndham Logistics server logs, detailing the $15 million Gavin had vaporized across unregulated cryptocurrency exchanges and illegal gambling platforms. Next came the forensic toxicology report laying out the weaponized thallium delivery system concealed inside the biometric watchpad. Finally, I handed him a second drive containing the hidden camera footage of Gavin and Lydia, mapping out the precise timeline of my chemical execution and their subsequent corporate insurance payout. Leonard sat in stunned silence as he worked through the evidence. He read the toxicology report twice, his jaw hardening with visible disgust. He plugged the drives into a secure offline terminal and watched the living room footage in full. The cold, sociopathic calculation radiating from Lydia and the greedy desperation bleeding off Gavin filled every corner of that small room. When the video ended, Leonard slowly removed his reading glasses and pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. He looked across the table at me with a mixture of professional shock and quiet, personal sympathy. "Edmund," he said, his voice low. "We have more than enough probable cause to authorize a fully armed tactical operation against your residence and corporate headquarters this afternoon. We can have your son and your daughter-in-law in federal custody before sundown. They will face decades behind bars for grand larceny, wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. We can bring this terrible ordeal to an end right now and ensure they spend the rest of their lives in a concrete cell." I held his gaze, my expression giving away nothing. "No," I replied, my voice flat and steady. "I don't want a quiet arrest behind closed doors. I don't want them taken away in the middle of the night. If we move on them today, Gavin will shape the narrative. He will play the victim. He will retain expensive lawyers and claim the mob forced his hand. He'll try to salvage whatever unearned dignity he has left." I pressed my hands flat against the cold surface of the metal table and leaned forward. "I want them to fall from the highest possible height. I want them to feel the full, intoxicating rush of total victory. I want them absolutely convinced they have outsmarted me, locked down the insurance payout, and claimed my entire empire. I want them standing in the full glare of their supposed triumph right before I pull everything out from under them. I want this to be public, flawless, and utterly devastating." Leonard studied my face through a long, tense silence. He understood precisely what I was asking for. It was well outside standard federal protocol and carried serious risk, but he also understood the profound and unforgivable depth of what had been done to me. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "All right." Edmund Leonard said, his tone sharpening into tactical precision. "If we're doing this your way, we build a tightly controlled federal sting operation. We let them move on their own timeline, but we own the entire environment around them. Every digital communication, every wire transfer, every physical movement gets monitored. But you have to understand the real physical danger you're accepting. You cannot stop wearing that watch, or they will know immediately that something has changed. You will have to endure the thallium exposure for several more days while we position everything. Are you absolutely certain your body can hold out until Friday?" I thought about the blinding nausea, the tremors that locked my hands into claws, and the terrifying weakness that drained my legs every morning. I thought about the invisible heavy metal working steadily through my organs, dragging me closer to the grave my own son had dug. "I'm absolutely certain," I said smoothly, projecting a physical confidence I did not possess. "We schedule an emergency meeting of the corporate board of directors for this coming Friday. Gavin desperately needs my public signature on the power of attorney documents to satisfy the mob lenders and cement his illegitimate executive grip. I'll tell him I'm finally ready to hand over the company and surrender my entire estate." We let him assemble the board, the corporate lawyers, and the major shareholders in the main executive boardroom. We let him stand at the head of that table and reach for his crown. And then, right at the moment he truly believes he has won everything, we spring the trap and take him apart completely. I left the secure federal facility with something new burning in my chest. Special Agent Leonard Hargraves walked me to the exit, his final words staying with me as I stepped out into the cold afternoon air. The drive back to the house felt entirely different from every drive before it. The crushing weight of betrayal was still there, but it was now anchored by the cold, immovable certainty of justice on its way. The federal sting operation was live. Undercover surveillance teams were already threading quietly into the corporate network, tracking Gavin's frantic offshore wire attempts and watching the dangerous mob-connected lenders moving in the shadows. My only remaining task was to play the tragic dying king with absolute conviction and deliver my treacherous son directly into their waiting hands. I pulled into the dark driveway, moved slowly through the front door, and felt the immediate sickening assault of the thallium driving through my veins. My hands shook violently, and a surge of crushing nausea forced me to seize the hallway table for support. The heavy metal was doing exactly what Lydia had engineered it to do. I did not need to manufacture the appearance of a broken, failing man. I simply had to take that genuine, unrelenting physical agony and channel it into the greatest performance of my life. I made my way slowly into the quiet study, dropped into the chair behind my mahogany desk, and stared at the black telephone for a long time. I needed to wait for the deep evening hours. I needed Gavin to feel the full, suffocating pressure of his mob deadline tightening around his throat before I extended the lifeline he was so desperately reaching for. I needed his panic to completely overwhelm whatever thin thread of suspicion he might still be holding on to. When the grandfather clock in the hallway finally struck 7, I lifted the receiver and dialed Gavin's private line. He answered on the third ring, his voice wound tight with barely contained anxiety. He snapped a hostile answer, clearly bracing for another bone-chilling call from his brutal underground creditors. I drew a deliberately shallow, ragged breath, letting the genuine exhaustion buried deep in my lungs push my voice into a pitiful, trembling whisper. "Gavin," I rasped carefully, making sure my slurred words sounded impossibly weak, thick with crushing, total defeat. "It is your father." A sharp, panicked intake of breath crackled through the line, immediately swallowed by a sudden, sickeningly sweet, entirely artificial shift in his lying tone. "Dad," he said eagerly, pouring counterfeit concern into every calculated syllable. "How are you feeling tonight? Lydia and I have been absolutely sick with worry over your declining health and your terrible confusion today." I closed my eyes briefly, letting the pure, white-hot hatred I carried fuel my desperate performance. "You were right, son," I murmured, deliberately soft, releasing a weak, rattling cough straight into the receiver. "You were right about every single thing. My mind is going. My body has completely given out, and I can no longer battle this dark, terrifying confusion. I just want to rest. I want this crushing weight lifted from me entirely. Bring the legal power of attorney papers. Bring whatever financial transfer documents you need. I will sign absolutely everything over to you." The silence that swallowed the line afterward was thick and suffocating. I could practically hear the greedy machinery grinding away in his skull as he registered that he had just hit the ultimate jackpot. "Oh, Dad." Gavin exhaled beautifully, draping his jubilant triumph behind a heavy curtain of solemn, dutiful concern. "I know this is an incredibly painful decision, but it truly is for the best. I will handle every single detail. You just focus on resting. I will come to the house right now with the corporate lawyers to finalize the paperwork." "No," I cut in immediately, my ragged voice barely above a breath, but suddenly edged with iron, injecting exactly the right measure of stubborn, weathered pride. Not in the dark, like some shameful secret buried in a back room. I built Wyndham Logistics with nothing but my bare hands. I poured 40 years of blood, sweat, and tears into that empire. If I am going to surrender my throne and hand over my entire estate, I intend to do it with dignity. I am going to do it in plain sight. I let my labored breathing drag loudly and heavily into the receiver. "I want a formal emergency meeting of the full board of directors convened this coming Friday morning. I want the corporate attorneys, the executive vice presidents, and every major shareholder seated in the main boardroom. I want to look every one of them in the eye, deliver a proper farewell, and publicly pass the torch to my son. If you want my signature on those documents, Gavin, that is my single non-negotiable condition." Gavin went quiet. I could almost feel his desperate panic doing violent battle with his towering, blinding greed. He needed that money immediately to pay off the mob syndicate by late Friday evening. A public board meeting pushed his access to my trust funds back by 48 agonizing, dangerous hours. But the strategic genius buried inside my condition made it utterly irresistible to a narcissist of his caliber. A private signature secured in a dim bedroom could be legally challenged later by suspicious board members or aggressive federal auditors. A deeply public, emotionally orchestrated handover executed in front of the entire corporate leadership would permanently cement his executive authority. It would seal him off from any future financial scrutiny or federal criminal inquiry. It was the perfect, unassailable cover story for every crime he had committed. "I completely understand, Dad," Gavin replied at last, his polished voice dripping with triumphant satisfaction. "You deserve a proper public farewell. I will reach out to the board immediately and arrange everything for Friday morning at exactly 9 sharp. I will have the legal team prepare the power of attorney files and the full estate transfer binders personally. You won't need to worry about a single thing ever again." I thanked him faintly, breathed the word love, and ended the call. The pathetic mask dropped away in an instant. I sat bolt upright in my chair, something cold and hard settling over my heart. The trap was perfectly laid. All that remained was surviving until Friday morning. The next 48 hours were a grinding exercise in pure endurance. I forced myself to keep wearing the poisoned timepiece, letting the heavy metal toxins continue seeping into my blood to maintain the illusion of my dying. My joints burned with deep, relentless fire, and my vision swam into a nauseating blur without warning. Yet my mind stayed razor-sharp, driven by the cold certainty of justice coming. I coordinated every invisible detail with Special Agent Leonard Hargraves, making certain his undercover federal teams were locked into position across the city. When Friday morning finally arrived, painting the sky in pale, washed-out gray, a deep calm settled over me. The long, agonizing wait was finished. The final act was beginning. I dressed in a tailored dark charcoal suit that hung loose on my wasted frame, deliberately amplifying every sign of frailty. I arranged a private medical transport to carry me to corporate headquarters and requested a wheelchair for the arrival. I wanted my entrance to be a study in helplessness. The glass and steel face of the Wyndham Logistics building rose against the skyline, a monument to 40 years of relentless sacrifice. As attendants wheeled me through the gleaming marble lobby, a hush rolled across the floor. Dozens of loyal employees stopped where they stood and stared. I saw real tears forming in the eyes of my senior staff. I saw pity, quiet grief, and unmistakable mourning. I kept my head bowed slightly, hands resting limp in my lap, playing the broken, dying founder right down to the last breath. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like a slow ascent toward a waiting blade. But underneath the trembling shell I wore, my blood was humming with cold, deliberate anticipation. The frosted glass doors of the executive boardroom parted, revealing the very heart of my empire. The room was vast, anchored by a massive custom mahogany table I had personally commissioned 3 decades ago. Floor-to-ceiling windows threw open a sweeping view of the city below, a stark contrast to the grim atmosphere pressing down on everything inside. The entire board was already in their seats. Some watched me with unmistakable grief. Others, the newer executives Gavin had installed, barely bothered to hide their cold indifference. To them, I was a fading relic, a stubborn obstacle finally being cleared from the path. I let the attendant wheel me to the head of the table, the seat of authority I was about to surrender forever. Gavin stood at the far end of the room, unable to contain the nervous energy radiating off him. He was rocking on the heels of his Italian leather shoes, wearing a crisp charcoal suit, straining to project the image of a composed, commanding leader. But the dark hollows beneath his eyes told the real story. The crushing weight of his offshore gambling debts and the mob's deadline bearing down on him by sundown. He was a drowning rat dressed up as a conquering king. He smiled as I was wheeled into place, a warm, manufactured display of filial devotion that turned my stomach with pure revulsion. Standing directly behind Gavin was Lydia, breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. She had dressed for a coronation, wearing a strikingly elegant deep burgundy designer dress that announced unlimited wealth and absolute power. A heavy necklace of flawless diamonds lay across her collarbone, undoubtedly bought with the corporate funds her husband had stolen. Her posture was rigid, her chin tilted just slightly upward, already carrying herself like the undisputed queen of the empire. Her cold, calculating eyes found mine across the long mahogany table entirely empty of anything resembling human feeling. I caught the quiet arithmetic flashing behind her gaze. She was counting down the hours until the thallium stopped my heart. She was already spending the $25 million corporate life insurance payout inside her twisted, sociopathic mind. Seated directly to Gavin's right was Clifford Prentice, the sleek, notoriously corrupt senior corporate counsel. Prentice was a slick, deeply unethical legal predator who had quietly engineered many of Gavin's shadiest corporate moves over the past 18 months. He possessed the rare and dangerous gift of making thoroughly illicit financial transactions appear perfectly legitimate on official corporate paper. Prentice wore a smug, self-satisfied smirk, clearly savoring the prospect of a fat bonus for shepherding this treacherous transfer of power across the finish line. He reached smoothly into his thick leather briefcase and produced a towering stack of densely printed legal documents. He squared the heavy papers against the polished mahogany surface, running his perfectly manicured fingers along the crisp edges with practiced care. These are the final comprehensive power of attorney authorizations, Mr. Wyndham. Clifford Prentice announced, his voice rolling across the silent boardroom with a slippery theatrical weight. In addition to the full transfer of all executive corporate controls and voting shares, these documents legally bind the immediate, irrevocable surrender of your entire personal estate, your private trust funds, and all physical property deeds placed directly and solely into the undisputed custody of your son, Gavin Wyndham. This sweeping legal transition, will he cleared his throat, effectively guarantee that your magnificent legacy is seamlessly protected and vigorously maintained throughout your deeply unfortunate medical decline. The silence pressing down on that boardroom was almost physical, a suffocating weight that squeezed the air from my chest. I raised my pale, trembling hands and set them weakly against the cool, polished wood of the table. I exhaled a soft, rattling breath and let a single manufactured tear track slowly down my wrinkled cheek. I swept my gaze around the table, meeting the eyes of the watching directors one by one. Several looked away, too ashamed to hold the gaze of a giant being stripped of everything he had built. Gavin stepped forward smoothly, closing the distance between us with practiced confidence. He lifted the thick legal stack and slid it deliberately across the polished wood until it settled directly in front of my shaking hands. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his suit jacket and produced the heavy, solid gold fountain pen, the very pen I had proudly gifted to him upon his graduation from law school. An instrument meant to sign honest and honorable agreements. He bent forward, planting both hands firmly on the armrests of my wheelchair, caging me in place. His face hovered just inches from mine. I could smell the sharp, metallic bite of his nervous sweat cutting straight through the expensive cologne. He pressed the gold pen into my trembling palm and wrapped my cold fingers around the heavy barrel. Then he flashed a broad, triumphant, entirely hollow smile at the watching board before dropping his voice to a low whisper meant only for me. "It's time to rest, Dad," Gavin murmured, his tone saturated with arrogant, condescending finality. "You've done more than enough for us. I've got everything handled from here." I looked down at the heavy gold pen lying in my open palm. Gavin still loomed over me, his face radiating a sickeningly assured smirk, fully convinced he had sealed his victory. I let the silence stretch for 5 agonizing seconds, leaving his arrogant words suspended in the stale boardroom air. Then I simply opened my fingers. The solid gold pen slipped free and hit the polished mahogany table with a sharp, explosive metallic crack. The sudden sound detonated through the room like a gunshot, Several board members physically flinched in their leather chairs. Gavin blinked a flash of genuine confusion, fracturing his manufactured composure. He instinctively reached for the fallen pen, assuming my failing motor skills had finally given out entirely. But before his hand could even graze the cold metal, I gripped the sturdy armrests of my wheelchair. I drew a deep, steadying breath, filled my lungs with cold air, and pushed myself upward. I drove past the fierce burning in my joints and the thick, rolling nausea the thallium had planted in my gut. Pure, undiluted adrenaline surged through me, burning away every last trace of manufactured weakness. I rose slowly, deliberately, peeling away the illusion of the broken, dying old man. I pulled my spine straight and squared my shoulders until I stood rigid and towering. I loomed over Gavin, throwing a long, dark shadow across his suddenly trembling frame. Every person in that executive boardroom went completely, utterly silent. You could have heard a single pin drop on the carpet. The assembled directors stared up at me with wide, horror-struck eyes, frozen by the impossible spectacle of a man they had believed to be on death's doorstep, now standing with the imposing iron authority of a man who had built an empire from nothing. Gavin stumbled backward, his Italian leather shoes scraping clumsily against the floor. The color drained from his face in an instant, leaving his skin a pale, sickly gray. His mouth worked open and shut without producing a sound, his mind struggling to process the terrifying reality collapsing around him. "Dad!" He finally managed, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched stammer. "What are you doing? You need to sit down. You are incredibly sick." "I am exactly the man I have always been." "Gavin," I replied. My voice was no longer a fragile, rattling whisper. It was a booming, resonant thunder that vibrated through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I held his terrified gaze and let him absorb the full, crushing force of my fury. "You genuinely believed I was nothing but a blind and pathetic fool. You mistook my unconditional love for a father's terminal stupidity. You thought you could stroll into my corporate sanctuary and loot my legacy while I quietly choked out my last breath in the dark." I reached into the inner breast pocket of my tailored charcoal suit and calmly withdrew a small black multimedia remote. I kept my eyes locked on my trembling son as I raised my arm and aimed the device at the ceiling. I pressed the center button. The massive state-of-the-art corporate projector hummed to life with a low, mechanical whir. The heavy motorized screen descended slowly over the far wall of the boardroom, throwing a bright rectangular glow across the mahogany table. Clifford Prentice. The corrupt corporate lawyer began frantically gathering his fraudulent power of attorney papers, his instincts already screaming that something catastrophic had shifted in the room. But instead of the sanitized executive transition slides Gavin had prepared to legitimize his hostile takeover, the massive screen flickered and blazed to life with the crisp, stark contrast of infrared security footage. It was the hidden camera recording from my private living room, captured just a few nights before. The high-definition video showed Gavin and Lydia lounging easily on my sofa, working through my rare, expensive single-malt bourbon. The highly sensitive audio transmitters filled the hushed boardroom with perfect, undeniable clarity. The assembled board of directors sat in paralyzed, absolute horror as the digital ghost of my son began his frantic, pathetic confession. Gavin's desperate voice bounced off the walls, laying out in vivid detail how he had recklessly burned exactly $15 million of critical corporate operating funds on catastrophic underground cryptocurrency bets. The executives drew audible, sharp breaths as the recording exposed the staggering illegal gambling debts Gavin had accumulated, and the mob-connected lenders who were threatening to violently seize the company's assets by Friday evening. The pristine corporate illusion Gavin had fought so hard to maintain was reduced to ash in seconds. But the very worst was still coming. The video kept rolling, delivering the most savage and unforgivable revelation of the entire treacherous plot. Lydia leaned forward on the screen, her voice cold and completely stripped of human feeling. The audio carried her chilling complaint about my unexpected physical resilience. She gave Gavin explicit instructions to aggressively increase the lethal dosage on the transdermal watchpad. She spoke about the heavy metal thallium with casual ease, describing how the highly toxic poison would systematically destroy my nervous system and pass for natural organ failure without drawing any medical suspicion. The reaction in the boardroom was immediate and entirely visceral. Several senior directors physically recoiled, hands flying to their mouths in shock and revulsion. One of the executive vice presidents murmured a quiet prayer. They were not merely watching a reckless executive pillage corporate funds. They were sitting witness to a calculated, cold-blooded, and entirely premeditated murder plot discussed with the flat, casual indifference of planning a weekend trip. The recording reached its devastating peak. Gavin's recorded voice filled the room, eagerly mapping out his final treacherous endgame. Once he signs the power of attorney, we drop him in a nursing home and let the thallium finish the job, the recorded Gavin explained. The moment his heart stops, the $25 million Keyman corporate life insurance policy pays out to me. We clear the debts, liquidate what's left, and disappear to Europe. The ultimate sickening betrayal was finally exposed for every person in that room to see. My life, my decades of relentless sacrifice was worth nothing more than a $25 million payout to my only child. I pressed the black remote a second time. The infrared footage vanished instantly, replaced by the detailed multi-page forensic toxicology report from the private laboratory. The massive screen blazed with the lethal concentrations of heavy metal detected inside the watch casing, the full chemical breakdown of the weaponized hydrogel, the certified signature of the lead toxicologist. The cold, irrefutable scientific proof of their attempted murder stared down at every person in that room, impossible to dismiss and absolutely damning. Gavin crumpled into a leather chair, his whole body shaking in violent, uncontrollable tremors as the inescapable weight of his total destruction finally landed on him. He buried his face in his trembling hands and let out a muffled, pathetic sob of raw terror. Lydia, by contrast, reacted with the pure instinct of a cornered predator. The meticulously maintained mask of elegant, untouchable superiority she had worn her entire life shattered into 1,000 pieces in an instant. She understood in a fraction of a second that her glamorous future was entirely dead and that a federal prison cell was all that remained. She let out a harsh, guttural scream and lunged across the boardroom. Her expensive designer heels skidded on the polished floor as she clawed her way frantically toward the multimedia console, reaching desperately for the thick black power cord to rip the projector from the wall. She wanted to kill the presentation, to somehow stop the devastating truth from continuing to broadcast her guilt to the horrified room. "Freeze," I commanded, my voice cracking across the space like a physical whip. The raw authority packed into that single word hit her like a wall of solid concrete. Lydia stopped dead, her hand frozen mere inches from the electrical outlet. She turned her head slowly toward me. Her eyes flooded with a deep, consuming terror she had never encountered before in her life. She was completely immobilized, pinned under the scorching weight of my stare. The trap had closed permanently and without mercy. "You are right, Gavin." My voice rang steady and absolute across the vast boardroom, carrying the full thunder of 40 years of unquestioned authority. "And I am finally resting today. But you are going to prison." The heavy frosted glass doors of the executive boardroom did not simply swing open. They exploded inward. A tightly coordinated wave of armed tactical agents from both the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Dallas Police Department poured into the room. Special Agent Leonard Hargraves led the charge, weapon drawn, his tactical vest, broadcasting his federal authority to every person present. The sheer, overwhelming force of the sudden raid instantly shattered the fragile, terrified silence that had paralyzed the corporate directors. "Federal agents, nobody move. Hands where we can see them." Hargraves roared, his commanding voice cutting clean through the rising panic. The senior board members lurched backward, shoving their expensive leather chairs away from the mahogany table. They flattened themselves against the floor-to-ceiling windows, desperately trying to put physical distance between themselves and the criminal catastrophe unfolding before them. Clifford Prentice, the corrupt corporate counsel, practically spilled out of his seat. He thrust his perfectly manicured hands high above his head, his face draining of all color as the sudden terrifying realization set in that his lucrative illegal career had just come to a permanent end. Gavin didn't even have time to process what was happening. Two heavily armored federal agents seized him by his tailored shoulders and drove him face first into the polished surface of my custom mahogany table. The sickening crack of his skull meeting the hard wood rang out across the room. His arms were wrenched behind his back, and the sharp metallic snap of steel handcuffs locking around his wrists sounded like the final gavel drop on his privileged, treacherous life. Lydia fought back with the wild, unhinged ferocity of a trapped animal. As a female officer moved to apprehend her, Lydia swung her arms violently, her manicured nails raking through the air. She unleashed a piercing, hysterical scream that tore through the boardroom, a sound so completely stripped of her usual polished composure that it barely seemed human. Every last trace of her untouchable facade was obliterated. The strikingly elegant deep burgundy designer dress tore at the shoulder as two officers wrestled her forcefully to the ground, pressing her face into the plush corporate carpet and fastening her hands securely behind her back. "Get your filthy hands off of me!" Lydia shrieked, thrashing her head wildly. Tears carved angry streaks through her smeared makeup, and the thick diamond necklace dug painfully into her collarbone as she strained against the federal restraints. "I am Lydia Wyndham. You have absolutely no legal right to touch me. I demand to speak with my private lawyers immediately. This is a massive, unforgivable mistake. The only mistake you made was attempting to chemically execute a federal witness." Agent Hargraves replied with cold precision, standing directly over her struggling form. He offered her no sympathy whatsoever, reading her constitutional rights in a crisp, authoritative voice that completely drowned out her frantic, high-pitched protests. Gavin, however, had abandoned every last shred of his arrogant defiance. As the tactical agents hauled him up from the surface of the table, his legs buckled entirely beneath him. He dropped straight to his knees on the floor directly in front of my wheelchair. He was weeping openly and without restraint. The thick, strutting pride that had powered his treacherous campaign was gone in an instant, replaced by the naked, wretched terror of a deeply cowardly man finally staring down the full consequences of everything he had done. "Dad, please," Gavin begged, his voice fracturing into a high, desperate whine. Fat tears streamed down his face and dripped onto his crisp charcoal suit. "Please, you have to stop this. Tell them this is a terrible misunderstanding. I was completely desperate. Those underground lenders were going to kill me, Dad. They were going to tear apart everything you built. I only did this to protect our family empire. You have to show me mercy. I am your only son." I looked down at the weeping, shaking man kneeling before me. I searched my own heart for even a single remaining fragment of paternal love, for the warm, unconditional devotion that had once driven me to trust him with everything I had spent my life building. There was nothing there, not one trace. The thallium had ravaged my body, but his profound sociopathic betrayal had permanently severed whatever bond had once bound us together. My eyes were cold and entirely empty as I looked at his pathetic, tear-soaked face. "You did not protect our family empire, Gavin," I said, my voice hollow with a terrifying, icy calm. "You tried to burn it to the ground to bankroll your own arrogant failures. You plotted to take my life, entirely certain that your bloodline placed you above basic human decency." I reached slowly across my body with my trembling right hand. I unclasped the heavy luxury watch secured to my left wrist. The thick leather strap slid through my fingers. The lethal transdermal pad, still saturated with the heavy metal toxin that had been systematically shutting down my organs for an entire week, remained firmly embedded inside its custom casing. I held the timepiece up for one brief, tense moment. letting the shaken board of directors see clearly the weapon my own son had willingly deployed against me. Then I opened my hand and let it fall. It dropped directly onto the carpet and landed between Gavin's trembling knees with a dull, heavy thud. I am officially returning my Father's Day gift. I told him, my tone as sharp and unforgiving as a blade. I highly suggest you hold on to it. It will undoubtedly be the last physical reminder you will ever have of the incredibly generous father you so foolishly tried to murder. Gavin stared blankly at the toxic watch lying on the floor, his body convulsing with loud, heaving sobs. He finally understood that his silver tongue and his desperate tears held absolutely no power anymore. He was completely, irrevocably dead to me. Special Agent Hargraves stepped forward and gripped Gavin firmly by the back of his suit collar. He pulled my weeping son to his feet and drove him toward the shattered, frosted glass doors. The officers mirrored him, precisely dragging a still screaming, still thrashing Lydia right behind him. The corporate lawyers and the shell-shocked board members pressed themselves flat against the walls, clearing a wide path for the criminal exodus. As they were marched out of my sight forever, the crushing, toxic weight that had pressed down on me for so long finally seemed to lift. My empire was safe. My justice had been delivered. 6 months later, the sharp winds of Dallas felt refreshingly crisp against my face as I moved through the busy downtown streets. The heavy, suffocating fog that had clouded my mind and ravaged my body was gone entirely. The thallium had been fully purged from my system through intensive medical treatment and relentless physical rehabilitation. My strength had returned, and my vision was startlingly clear. Gavin and Lydia were no longer my burden to carry. They were currently housed inside a maximum security federal penitentiary, both serving mandatory 20-year sentences, following brutal convictions for attempted murder and massive wire fraud. The highly publicized trial had unfolded as a brief, devastating spectacle, concluding with their absolute and total ruin. I had legally and irrevocably disinherited Gavin from my entire estate, guaranteeing he would never lay hands on a single penny of the legacy he had so ruthlessly schemed to steal. I successfully guided Wyndham Logistics back from the dangerous edge of financial collapse, stabilized the corporate accounts, and permanently erased every trace of the underground mob debts he had so cowardly accumulated in secret. The company itself was stronger than it had ever been, but something deep inside me had permanently, fundamentally changed. My entire personal perspective on life had quietly shifted in ways I was still learning to understand. I found myself standing on the sidewalk in front of a beautiful, highly upscale storefront, its gleaming glass windows trimmed with elegant gold lettering that caught the pale morning light. I pushed open the heavy mahogany door, a warm and inviting bell chiming softly above my head as I stepped inside. The rich, intoxicating scent of fine leather and freshly brewed espresso immediately filled the immaculate room. And there, standing proudly behind the pristine glass counters lined with magnificent, intricate timepieces, was Dmitry Volkov. 6 months ago, Dmitry had been nothing more than an incredibly observant jeweler working quietly out of a tiny, cramped subway booth at Cedars Station. He was the brilliant, meticulous man who had first detected the microscopic tampering concealed inside my watch casing, and in doing so had ultimately saved my life without ever fully realizing the magnitude of what he had done. I smiled genuinely and warmly as he glanced up from his polished workbench. I had personally and fully financed Dmitry's new storefront as a profound, quiet thank you, a silent acknowledgement of his extraordinary vigilance and his rare, unshakable honesty in a world that rarely rewards either. Dmitry carefully wiped his hands on a clean cloth and stepped around the polished counter, returning my smile with a firm, deeply respectful handshake that carried the weight of everything we had both lived through. We settled comfortably into 2 plush leather chairs, positioned near the large front window, sharing a steaming cup of strong, dark coffee while watching the busy Dallas streets rush steadily past outside. There was no need between us to dredge up the terrifying darkness of recent months, or to openly revisit the brutal betrayal that had first thrown us together under such desperate circumstances. We were simply two men sitting quietly in the warm morning light, sharing a deep and entirely unspoken understanding of the true and absolute value of time. Every single ticking second was no longer a terrifying countdown racing toward a tragic and premature end, but a precious, hard-won victory claimed back from the people who had tried to steal it from me. I drew a slow, deep breath, allowing myself to fully savor the rich warmth of the coffee and the gentle comfort of the morning sun pressing against my skin through the large front glass. I had willingly torn down my own empire to expose the treacherous wolves concealed inside my own household, and in doing so I had finally and completely reclaimed my own life on my own terms. I let my gaze drift across the beautiful watches displayed carefully around us, listening to their steady rhythmic heartbeats ticking in quiet unison. They were no longer sinister weapons of silent assassination. They were beautiful, enduring testaments to survival resilience and the indomitable strength of the human spirit when pushed to its absolute breaking point. The raw, painful scars left behind by my son's horrific betrayal would likely never disappear entirely. But they no longer governed my days or poisoned my mornings. I was alive. I was completely and utterly free. My future was entirely my own, to shape, to build, and to write as I saw fit. I smiled once more, letting the warm, quiet atmosphere of that beautiful little shop wash gently over me like a tide finally receding after a long and punishing storm. The vast logistics company was now running flawlessly and cleanly, entirely free at last from the long, suffocating shadow of corruption. I had carefully appointed a trustworthy and capable executive board to manage the daily operations in my name. My legacy was entirely and permanently secure. I settled back and took another long, deeply relaxing sip of the excellent espresso, tasting every note of it. The bitter past was officially, irrevocably behind me. The bright morning stretched forward with what felt like infinite open promise. I had endured and survived the absolute worst that life could deliver, and now finally I was truly and completely ready to live again. Blood alone does not automatically grant any person the unconditional right to your deepest trust, nor does a shared bloodline excuse malice carefully disguised as love. As parents, we pour our entire lives into constructing a fortress designed to protect the children we raised and sacrificed everything for. But we must never allow the power of that love to blind us entirely to the wolves already positioned and waiting inside our own gates. Betrayal from within your own walls is the most toxic, insidious poison there is, quietly and systematically destroying everything you have built while you refuse to acknowledge the signs directly in front of you. True family is defined and earned through consistent respect, genuine loyalty, and concrete daily actions, not simply through a shared last name printed on a document. Never be afraid to tear down everything you have built, if that is what it ultimately takes to survive the very people who are actively trying to steal it from you. If you have stayed with me all the way to the end of this story, I am grateful. Truly. This one cost me something just to tell it, and I hope it gave you something back in return. Looking back now, I understand that the most dangerous betrayal is not the one that comes from a stranger. It is the one you never saw coming because you were too busy loving the person responsible. I gave Gavin everything my name, my company, my trust, my future, and he tried to repay me with poison. I believe God kept me alive for a reason, and part of that reason was to pass this lesson on. So here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Pay attention to what is draining you, not just physically, but emotionally. Sometimes the thing slowly killing you is closer than you think. Love your family fiercely, but never let love become a blindfold. Trust is earned through actions over time, not simply through blood. When you sense that something is deeply wrong, trust that instinct. Gather your evidence quietly and act when the moment is right. And never measure your worth by what someone else is willing to pay for it. Your life is not a policy payout. It never was. If this story moved you or made you think, I would be glad to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you know someone who is quietly carrying a heavy burden of family betrayal, consider passing this along to them. They may need it more than you know. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe to Dad Revenge. There is more to come. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself out there.